Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from November 29th to December 5th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with some sales figures before we get into the politics, just to highlight that the American consumer is still voting for cannabis with their dollars. As a CUNA's flash report provides us, that Black Friday cannabis retail spending increased 20%, while the overall retail industry decreased 28.3% in Black Friday traffic. So what do they mean by that? Business intelligence from CUNA shows that Green Wednesday, November 24th, and Black Friday, November 26th, were the second and third highest sales days for legal cannabis in the US this year, with Green Wednesday bringing in 98.2 million in sales and Black Friday bringing in another 99 million. The largest day for cannabis sales this year was 4/20, the unofficial cannabis consumption holiday. But I think that's worth noting, and there's a bit more information here if you want to pause to read. But the biggest highlight worth, I think, adding is that the 4-day period surrounding Thanksgiving holiday, November 24th to the 27th, brought in a total of 254.7 million in cannabis sales, which was actually more than CUNA predicted. As CUNA released a prediction report last week or a few weeks back, and it was in one of my past videos, estimating that the time period would actually just garner 251 million in sales, which was 98.5% accurate compared to the actual total sales. So considering the sales actually beat the projections, I think that's quite positive. And if you wanted to check out the breakdown, there's some more information there. But just wanted to share this as we did get this in, and that's very nice to see that consumers are voting for cannabis still. And Ben Kovler brings us with this tweet, but I just want to share it first so that we can take a look at Illinois sales for the month of November. And they do remain strong, but they have not surpassed some previous months, especially the top months set in July, when there's obviously a lot of spending in music festivals. But that being said, for November, they did bring in more items than October and September and August, so at least they're selling more items, with 81.7 million coming from in-state residents and 39 million coming from out-of-state residents, for a total of 120.7 million. So sales are still very strong, and obviously if we add this all up, they've surpassed $1 billion in their second year, which is a lot more than they did in their first year, which was roughly 669 million. And he makes a great point, adding net Illinois sales are flattening because there are no new stores. And although Illinois did just approve over 100 new licenses, and many of those go to social equity entrepreneurs, there's a difference between approving licenses and then making it easy for those entrepreneurs to get those stores online. So he sums it up perfectly. No new stores equals no new wealth creation, no new jobs. So when there's lots of talk of social equity, whether it's the federal level or the state level, but then there's no action, all we're seeing is fakequity, and that's why we're getting fed up as investors. So on to the news from politics. Brady Cobb provides this update. Senate in recess today, so the Senate Armed Services Committee staff and members can work through their bill and amendments. Rep. Hoyer indicated the House conference version is ready with SAFE in it, so this is a big thing, and again is sort of in line with the script. It's just really testing our patience, but this is the time to exercise it, and expect ping pong conference process to crank up on Monday, Tuesday, and move with the debt ceiling cleared, which is why now is the time to keep calling and emailing. And if you're new to my channel, these are the numbers to Booker and Schumer's offices, so you can call in, express your support, raise your voice, and take a stand for something, especially something that 70% of Americans want, and passing SAFE is the next incremental step to allowing this industry to flourish. So on to this one from Todd Harrison, highlighting that he thinks the Canna narrative has been hijacked by the focus on safe banking and NDAA, but also just adding, get your rest this weekend. And again, the best thing you can do, let our elected reps know how important this is, reach out and make your voice heard. But I wanted to just share this from Politico Pro, as lawmakers eyed compromise to finally pass the NDAA, and this was reported on December 3rd. So what do they have to say about this? Congressional negotiators could quickly wrap up compromise Pentagon policy legislation in the coming days, despite a logjam that prevented the Senate from passing its own version of the bill this week. The House and Senate Armed Services Committees have been meeting to hash out the differences in their competing versions of the NDAA for weeks. And with this time running short before the end of the year, lawmakers appear ready to jettison a formal conference process, which would require the Senate to pass its own bill to ensure a final bill can pass as early as this week. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer first indicated a deal on the defense bill could be close, saying on the floor Thursday evening that the House plans to pass the final NDAA next week to provide our troops with the pay they deserve and the military with the tool it needs to carry out its missions. While this version, as I understand it, will be the conference-agreed version of the defense bill, Hoyer said, this has been the discussion between the House and Senate. So although it says almost here, lawmakers appear ready to jettison a formal conference process because apparently they've been meeting and going through the amendments over the past few weeks, he does still add that this version of the final bill will be the conference-agreed version of the defense bill, which is basically just in line with the script that we've been told is that, SAFE will get through possibly in the conference process, and we're not anticipating it to be passed in the Senate version of the NDAA. Just wanted to share that, as that is relevant to what I've been saying over past videos. Well, I just wanted to share this tweet quickly from Brady Cobb, because he does share one of the few mainstream media outlets even covering Schumer, Cannabis, and NDAA in the same sentence. And from my understanding, it is Politico, because Natalie Fertig writes for Politico, but just wanted to highlight what it says here. Pressure builds on Schumer to include cannabis banking in the NDAA. But if you've been watching my videos and following Brady Cobb as a source, the script was never to put SAFE in the Senate version of the NDAA so that Schumer could save face and stand strong on social equity for his constituents, and so that it would go to the conference process and SAFE would be added into the final version in the conference process. That was always the script. So just wanted to share this, is that this is what the media is telling the American people. But then we do have a beauty politician in the form of Dave Joyce here highlighting that if the Senate doesn't include safe banking in the NDAA, I will fight for it in conference. So this is just sort of in line with everything. And although we're seeing the mainstream media outlets sort of head faking the people, thinking, no, if SAFE doesn't get added to the Senate version, then it's dead. No, that's not the case. So just love to see other politicians getting involved in this fight, because clearly they see the benefits of passing SAFE. So we have another politician that will fight for it in conference. Each day Congress refuses to pass this bipartisan bill, the Fed government endangers public safety, cripples the economic recovery of small business, and refuses states' right to implement their own laws. Which brings us to the main news that was introduced last week, as a GOP Congressman, Dave Joyce, and AOC team up on cannabis bill to incentivize state-level expungements. And so Rep. Dave Joyce, Republican from Ohio, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, are sponsoring the legislation titled the Harnessing Opportunities by Pursuing Expungements, or HOPE Act. It would encourage states to provide relief to people with nonviolent cannabis convictions through federal grants, the State Expungement Opportunity Grant Program run through the Department of Justice. That would help cover the administrative costs of identifying the clearing eligible cases. The bill proposes to appropriate $2 million in funding to support the program for each fiscal year starting in 2023 and ending in 2032. Specifically, the grants could be used by states to purchase technology used to facilitate expungements at scale, automate the relief process, fund legal clinics to help people get their records cleared, and support innovative partnerships to provide mass relief. Having been both a public defender and prosecutor, I've seen firsthand how cannabis law violations can foreclose a lifetime of opportunities ranging from employment to education to housing, Joyce said in a press release. Well said, Dave Joyce. So a little bit more info. By helping states establish and improve expungement programs for minor cannabis offenses, the HOPE Act will pave the way for expanded economic opportunities to thrive alongside effective investments to redress the consequences of the war on drugs, the congressman said. Just a bit more information on the bill before we move on. Under the bill, state governments and local governments shall submit to the Attorney General an application at such time, in such manner, and containing such information as the Attorney General may reasonably require to qualify for the grants. Further, the legislation would require the Attorney General to carry out a study on the impacts of cannabis convictions on individuals, as well as the financial costs for states that incarcerate people over nonviolent cannabis offenses. Officials in jurisdictions that receive the grants would be required to publish on a publicly accessible website information about the availability and process of expunging convictions for cannabis offenses, including information for individuals living in a different jurisdiction who were convicted of a cannabis offense in that jurisdiction. They would also need to submit to the Attorney General a report describing the uses of such funds and how many convictions for cannabis offenses have been expunged using such funds. While the proposal wouldn't end federal cannabis prohibitions, it would help facilitate relief at the state level where most cannabis arrests take place in the U.S. And this bill also holds bipartisan appeal, which is why it actually has a chance. And although it will not end federal cannabis prohibition, it's the next incremental step until we get what we need in order to finally deschedule this plant, free it, and end the damn prohibition that never worked in the first place. And so just to highlight that Dave Joyce is active on Twitter, and after Todd Harrison shared the news of his new bill, he responded by tweeting, "Your move, send Schumer." Just gotta love the humor that this man still has, and highlight that there are politicians fighting for this cause. So just wanted to share that. Lastly, this one comes from Camilo from BTIG on U.S. Cannabis. Now, this is just speculation from investment banks, adding their 2 cents, so don't take this as truth or anything. Read it with a grain of salt and compare it with what you already know. But I am going to post this here if you do want to pause to read it, as they've come to the conclusion that there's hope for SAFE after all. With the introduction of HOPE, House expungement bill could change the calculus for SAFE passage via the NDAA. So just wanted to relay all that new information in politics onto some new info, as Biden Treasury Secretary says, of course, cannabis banking would make the IRS's job easier. So why would the IRS not want SAFE to pass? And that is reason for the added pressure that we've been seeing. So just wanted to share this clip of Representative Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, who's actually the author of the SAFE Banking Act way back in 2014, making his case here.
Let me change the subject for 1 second. Just the subject that I've asked both of you about in the past, the SAFE Banking Act. which involves allowing financial institutions to provide financial services to the cannabis industry and those that serve the cannabis industry. And you may know that we passed it with big bipartisan votes out of this committee, off the floor to the Senate last cycle. This cycle, we amended the National Defense Authorization Act. So that's just to remind you where we are. In October, Cassidy Collins, a senior counsel in the Office of the Chief Counsel of the IRS, noted the special type of collection challenge the IRS undertakes regarding tax collection from cannabis-related businesses forced to operate in cash only. It's estimated that in just 3 states, nearly $50 million in taxes went unassessed because of unique issues surrounding the cannabis industry. Madam Secretary, do you agree? If these businesses were simply allowed to access the banking system and didn't have to transact business only in cash, it would make the IRS's job easier.
Yes, of course it would.
I yield back.
Point taken, because is there any other industry in the U.S. screaming, please tax us properly? Please let this cash be in the system so we can be treated like a regular business. Obviously, it benefits all parties, especially U.S. organizations, much like the Credit Unions Association. So I wanted to share this one as well. Safe Banking Act should be added to NDAA because the status quo, the current situation and environment is untenable. So just wanted to add this as pressure is mounting, not only from the IRS, but the Credit Unions National Association joined a diverse multi-sector coalition of organizations calling on Senate leaders to include the Safe Banking Act to the Senate Defense National Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022. Now, we know that it might not be added to the Senate version. It likely won't. It has its chance in the conference process. The Safe Banking Act was included in the House-passed NDAA. The Safe Banking Act would provide protections for financial institutions serving legal cannabis businesses. It has passed the House several times, most recently as a standalone bill in April, adding the status quo is untenable for workers, communities, ancillary businesses, and law-abiding financial institutions, the letter reads. An enactment would provide legitimate businesses with access to necessary insurance products and protections that are afforded to all other businesses in America, it adds. So for employees, customers, and neighbors of cannabis-related businesses, which is the fastest growing industry in the U.S. that you likely weren't aware of until you found my channel, the prohibition on banking services means a cash-intensive environment that is target for violent crime. And let me show you the perfect example. As MJ Biz Daily reports, new rash of California cannabis robberies threaten the survival of businesses. As a spate of violent robberies targeting cannabis businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area last month have thrown into question the survival of several small businesses, with the combined losses of those operators estimated to be at least 5 million, not 5 billion, but 5 million, still significant. And adding that these small business owners are saying, I was safer and had more money selling in the street illegally. So they're calling on San Francisco to levy their tax for a little bit of time so that they can stay in business. And guess what? San Francisco actually answered. They suspended cannabis tax to combat illegal cannabis sales. So just wanted to share this, as this is a victory for those small businesses in San Francisco. San Francisco Supervisors on Tuesday unanimously approved an ordinance to suspend the city's cannabis business tax through the end of next year in an attempt to curb illegal cannabis sales. But none of this would have even happened if SAFE was passed earlier on in the year. And ultimately, not passing SAFE just helps the large MSOs thrive and become bigger, more dominant businesses, and crushes the small mom and pop industry. So that is why SAFE has to pass, and that is why it would be great if you can show your support, call in, and help make this happen. On to a few other stories from marijuana moment. As bipartisan lawmakers push Veterans Affairs to allow medical cannabis access for veterans as soon as possible. Should have been done in the 70s after Vietnam, but anyways, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs must urgently institute a policy change to ensure that military veterans can access cannabis for therapeutic use, bipartisan coalition of congressional lawmakers said in a new letter. Writing to VA Secretary Dennis McDonough on Wednesday, the co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus urged the official to consider a change in policy to allow access to medical cannabis for VA patients and to act swiftly and implement this change as soon as possible. The lawmakers pointed to surveys showing high rates of opioid addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder among the veteran community. And another reason they're likely writing and asking for this change as soon as possible is because 100,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses in 2020, and I don't know how many of those were veterans, but likely a large number was. And by giving them access to cannabis, it means less deaths for the veterans. While lastly, this one from Marijuana Moment, as top federal drug official personally hesitates to study cannabis because of Schedule 1 research barriers? And why do you hold your job position? Are you not going to say anything? Nora Volkow, director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, made the comments during a Wednesday forum moderated by The Hill and sponsored by the Coalition for Cannabis Policy, Education, and Regulation that also featured congressional lawmakers, state regulators, and industry stakeholders. While Volkow has repeatedly talked about barriers to cannabis research in the U.S., where scientists scientists must jump through bureaucratic hoops to access cannabis for study purposes. And that's because the plant is designated a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act, the most restrictive category, and which any sane human being knows it never belonged there in the first place. And that's why it's so important to finally deschedule this damn plant to free it. But it's not just your average researcher who struggles to navigate the complex application process. Volkow, who runs America's top drug science agency, said she personally avoids studying Schedule I substances because of the federal red tape. What? Why do you even hold this job then if you can't solve the problems that your organization faces to do your job properly? One of the barriers that has actually been noted is that cannabis, by being a Schedule I substance, requires certain procedures that actually can be very lengthy, she said. Some instances, it detracts researchers who want to investigate it because it's just more cumbersome than doing studies on other substances. Well, it's too damn bad because if we can't deschedule it, we can't figure out how good of a medicine this damn plant is. And I just want to highlight this study from LiberPub.com, just on that note, of another study finding the benefits of cannabis, perceived efficacy, reduced prescription drug use, and minimal side effects of cannabis in patients with chronic orthopedic pain. So just to highlight the results and the conclusions, medical cannabis use was associated with clinical improvements in pain, function, and quality of life, with reductions in prescription drug use. 73% either ceased or decreased opioid consumption completely, and 31% discontinued benzodiazepines. Importantly, 52%, more than half of patients, did not experience intoxication as a side effect of cannabis therapy. Significant clinical benefits of cannabis occurred within 3 months of initiating cannabis therapy and plateaued at the subsequent follow-ups. In the conclusions, this work provides a direct relationship between the initiation of cannabis therapy and objectively fewer opioid and benzodiazepine prescriptions. Our work also identifies specific subpopulations of patients for whom cannabis may be most efficacious in reducing opioid consumption, and it highlights the importance of both physician involvement and patient self-titration in the symptom management. And so is it too much to ask that we get rid of incompetent bureaucrats like Nora Volkow who hesitate to do the right thing because it's too much work, and replace it with people that are actually going to say the difficult things early when necessary so that we can get out of this vicious cycle of non-accountability? Rant over. On to this one from MSOs, or about MSOs, but this one comes from Morgan Paxey, who's actually the managing director of the new Advisor Shares ETF Poseidon, which is a cannabis ETF, but just wanted to share this. Not to highlight what he thinks is going to happen with SAFE, but just to share this little snippet and graph about the US MSOs. So I'm going to try my best to decipher this. So think of this as MSOs bringing in less than 100 million in revenue, US MSOs bringing in 100 million to 300 million in revenue, US MSOs bringing in 300 million to 750, and then US MSOs bring in over 750. Now, if we take a look, enterprise value in 2022 revenue is represented in yellow, enterprise value in 2022 EBITDA represented in green. And these metrics are on the left side. So we're going to be looking at revenue and EBITDA on this left side, while debt to market cap and 2021 to 2022 revenue growth percentage-wise are going to be in this graph. And so basically all I can really say is that this graph really shows you that the best bang for your buck are the tier 1 MSOs. And while the tier 2 and tier 3 MSOs might provide with more revenue growth, again, overall, you're getting the best bang for your buck investing in tier 1 MSOs. Now, this is not advice. This is just education. I would just encourage you to do your own due diligence if you see what I'm getting at. But comparing US MSOs by their current valuation or market cap multiples right now, by the projected 2022 revenue numbers or sales that they're going to bring in the future, we can paint a better picture and develop a better understanding. So let's just categorize. These two right here will be tier 3 MSOs, tier 2, and then tier 1's the big 5. And so enterprise value divided by 2022 revenues, obviously the tier 1 or the tier 3 MSOs have lower enterprise value to revenue numbers, but that's also because they have higher debt to market cap. So they're trading at such a value because they're higher risk companies because they have a lot more debt outstanding. If we move over to the enterprise value by 2022 EBITDA numbers, this is looking at earnings or profits before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Obviously, these tier 2 and tier 3 MSOs are going to see a decent amount of profits, but not as high as the tier 1 MSOs after interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So then lastly, debt to market cap, which because this industry cost to capital has been high, this has been the biggest factor. There's more risk investing in the tier 3 and tier 2 MSOs, but if you invest in the tier 1, the risk goes down because their balance sheets are much healthier. And then more importantly, the 2021 to 2022 revenue growth rates. Obviously, the tier 3 MSOs and the tier 2 MSOs are going to see high growth rates, but just not as high as the already established tier 1 MSOs, and this black line represents that. So we will likely see the most growth out of tier 2 MSOs, just because, again, they're not as established, but they don't have as much as healthy as a balance sheet or as low of cost to capital as the tier 1. So this, I think, really just highlights how much of much of a less risky the tier 2 and tier 1 MSOs are than the tier 3, and really just highlighting that tier 1 MSOs are the best bang for your buck. So I did my best to try to decipher that on the go. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to address them. But that is one way of looking at all the MSOs and why safe passing is so important for tier 2 and tier 3 MSOs, because that lowers their cost of capital and that reduces the risk here on that side. And so just also wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison. As pod tax may yield $12 billion for states by 2030, says Barclays, yes, this is why it's a good time to finally end cannabis prohibition and the failed war on drugs that never worked. On to some states. So this one comes from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for the latest week of November 29th to December 3rd out of Florida. So if we just take a look, only one new store was open this past week in Tampa Bay, and that was Trulieve. But Florida increased their qualified patient count up to 646,542, up from 644,173 last week, for a total increase of 2,409 patients. So good to see that growth consistent, but just wanted to add that numbers for Thanksgiving were very strong, and these MSOs know how to sell product, because we've never seen Trulieve do numbers anything like this. So just wanted to share this, and of course, if you're invested in any MSOs in Florida, you can check every single week how many milligrams of THC, how many milligrams of CBD, and how many ounces of smokable flower are sold. Now, this isn't in dollar figures, but it is the amount, and so this tells you, if your company is maintaining their market share, and you can check week over week whether they're selling more or selling less. But this was huge. Wanted to share this as Trulieve really went into beast mode this past week. And onto this one out of New Jersey. Just wanted to highlight that apparently New Jersey and the Cannabis Regulatory Commission plans to have their next meeting on December 7th at 6 p.m. for the consideration of 2019 RFA dispensary awards, and this is likely the next round. So although we're seeing very, slow movement out of New Jersey, it's slow, it's steady, but at least there's something. So just wanted to share this as they are planning to get that going. Onto some MSOs as Verano affiliate expands Pennsylvania footprint with opening of Zenleaf Westchester dispensary. I'll walk you through the highlights as Zenleaf Westchester is Verano's 13th affiliated Pennsylvania dispensary and second state location to offer convenient drive-through service, marking the company's 91st location nationwide. And the Westchester Zenleaf storefront is the third of 6 permitted clinical registrant dispensary locations opened by Verano affiliate Agronomed Biologics and LLC. So they still have 3 that they can open eventually. While the Pennsylvania medical cannabis program has grown significantly to more than 630,000 patients statewide and caregivers, Zenleaf Westchester will offer expanded access to serve Chester County's medical cannabis community of nearly 26,000 patients. While Zenleaf Westchester is positioned, that's a tongue twister, say it fast 3 times, on Oakland Road, a high traffic location which is conveniently accessible from both US Routes 1 and 202 and sees average daily traffic of 14,000 vehicles according to Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. So good on Verano for strategically picking their locations and hoping that a lot of research is going into actually driving the success of those locations. While Cookies is happy to announce international cannabis brand and partnership with Intercure as they announce their European expansion. So Cookies announces that its international expansion into Europe through a partnership with Israel-based Intercure, the leading profitable and fastest growing cannabis company outside of North America. The parties entered into a multi-year deal under which Intercure will establish Cookies stores and medical cannabis pharmacies in Austria and UK in early 2022. So this is great for the Cookies brand, as Intercure, a Cookies international partner, is already cultivating, manufacturing, and distributing GMP standard Cookies branded products through its Cookies national medical cannabis pharmacy chain. Intercure will leverage its licensed international supply chain to serve the growing community of medical cannabis patients in Europe. So good on you, Cookies, especially going for the brand game, which is very important in the long run. While Tilray announces that they've launched their fast-acting oral strips, which highlights the commitment to medical cannabis innovation and patient care. And this is just another example of a unique product that you might not have thought of. So Tilray today announced its medical subsidiary, Aphria, has launched medical cannabis oral strips in THC and CBD-rich variants. Powered by Quick Strips TM proprietary technology, each Aphria medical strip contains a thin, edible film that contains rapidly dissolving, micronized cannabinoids that absorbs directly into the bloodstream, providing patients with a fast-acting, convenient, and precise dosing experience for relief from a range of conditions, which is just another perfect example of innovation in this industry, which allows consumers to get the benefits of medical cannabis without having to smoke and possibly damage their lungs. And that's going to help a lot of new medical patients get on board, I imagine. Well, just some more state news out of Marijuana Moment as Texas activists turn in signatures to put cannabis decriminalization on Austin's 2022 ballot. So Texas activists on Wednesday turned in signatures to place a cannabis decriminalization initiative on Austin's ballot. Ground Game Texas, a progressive organization that was established earlier this year, submitted more than 30,000 signatures to qualify the local measures to go before the votes in the May 7th election next year. While Austin, as well as other Texas Texas cities like Dallas have already independently enacted law enforcing policy changes aimed at reducing arrests for cannabis-related offenses by issuing citations and summons. The Austin Freedom Act of 2021 would take the reform a step further, and the initiative seeks to end arrests and citations for misdemeanor cannabis possession within Texas's capital city. Also, it says police cannot issue citations for residue or paraphernalia in lieu of a possession charge. So great news out of Texas. Small efforts that will go a long way once we eventually see some reform Texas-wide. While Missouri GOP lawmaker files joint resolution to put cannabis legalization on ballot as activists launch separate campaigns. So this is great news out of Missouri, as a Republican Missouri lawmaker is again making a push to place cannabis legalization on the ballot, but some activists aren't waiting on the legislature to take action to refer the issue to voters, which is good, with one campaign officially launched gathering signatures on Wednesday for a separate reform initiative. So hopefully the citizens can beat the lawmakers to this, but it's positive to highlight that Rep. Shamed Dogan on Wednesday pre-filed his joint resolution to place a constitutional amendment on legalization on the 2022 ballot. He introduced a similar proposal last year, but did not advance. So under the lawmakers' plan, adults 21 and older could purchase, possess, and cultivate cannabis for personal use. It does not specify allowable amounts. So positive progress for the plant out of Missouri, and I think there's a good chance, especially if we put our trust in the activists, that this will make it on the ballot for 2022. But lastly, we end this episode on a strong call to action from Todd Harrison. I want to thank you for making it so easy for me to relay this important message to any American viewers. If you are American, please consider picking up your phone and calling Schumer or Booker's office and telling them why you support passing SAFE in the NDAA, because it will make the streets of America safer, because it will get $25 billion in cash off of the streets and into the system, allowing cannabis businesses to use credit cards and transact like any other businesses, and saving the lives of those that work in the cannabis industry so that they'll no longer be targets for armed robberies. It's all like passing SAFE is nothing but good things. And look, whether SAFE passes or not, if you're an investor in the space, you got to remember that this is still the most undervalued American industry and the fastest growing emerging market in the US. Highlighting this is the time to remember that falling share prices but increasing fundamentals actually means opportunity. So I really hope you've educated yourself and have been buying the dip, because this opportunity will not last forever, and this is your chance to be on the right side of history. So you going to take it? And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned in today's episode? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, especially if you learned something. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.